I've taught sport law in the sport management program for a little over 30 years. Presidents Young, Banks, and Welsh have appointed me faculty athletics representative, so my job is to oversee the A&M athletic department, and I'm the liaison to the SEC and the NCAA. So I'm going to talk about how money has changed and is changing college athletics. And when I think about this, I think about a Bob Dylan song called We're Changing Now. The times they are changing. And I want to read something that a CBS sports writer wrote 10 years ago. At some point in recent years, college athletics became a Bob Dylan protest song. Minus the folk guitar and harmonica, suddenly the system wasn't totally about the games or the coaches or the standings or the championships. It was an awakening, a realization, a revolution. Perhaps even the NCAA itself will be non-existent. I think he was more accurate than your average fortune teller. So he wrote that in 2014. The NCAA was formed in 1906, and for about 108 years, nothing bad really happened until 2014. And at that point, some student athletes got smart. So to understand what happened, you have to understand the Sherman Antitrust Act. So think back to the late 1890s. You had men that monopolized the industry, John D. Rockefeller with oil, Leland Stanford with the railroads, J.P. Morgan, Andrew Carnegie. And so they could set prices whatever they wanted to. So Congress decided this wasn't a good thing, and they passed the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890 that says any contract, combination, or conspiracy and restraint of trade among the several states is illegal. In other words, you can't fix prices. Well, for 108 years, the NCAA was a monopoly, and it fixed prices. So the allegations are that A&M is one of the co-conspirators with the other 1,075 members of the NCAA. So in 2014, they filed a lawsuit about the amount of tuition that they could get. So the NCAA set tuition or set scholarships at tuition, room and board, books and fees. And that's all they could get. So they said, well, that's not the full cost of attendance. They went through the case. Ultimately, the NCAA settled the case for $208 million. In that case, the judge also said for academic reasons, you can get up to $5,980 per year, so schools started paying that. Well, of course, the athletes that didn't have access to that then filed suit for their not full cost of attendance and also for the $5,980 that they didn't get every year. Also about that time, NIL came along, and the NCAA really had no choice, so they said, well, okay, NIL is okay. So you know what happened then? They get sued by the athletes that didn't have the opportunity to get NIL, so they're losing on both ends. And basically, the NCAA has been eviscerated. There is another case that basically they're saying we think the NCAA should be a completely free market to the highest money payers where the athletes ought to go. That's called the Jenkins case. There's another case where they're saying, hey, they're using our NIL on these broadcasts every night and every weekend. We should be paid for that. So now they've sued for that, and they've claimed $1.4 billion in damages, which under the Sherman Act would be trebled. We also have athletes saying, hey, I'm employees. About 3 weeks ago, a regional director of the National Labor Relations Board found that the basketball players at Dartmouth University were employees. That case is being appealed, but we'll see what happens with that. So with all of these things going on and the disaster that is NIL, it raises a lot of questions. So if they're employees, when we want a quarterback, do we have to post the position on the website like they did to hire all of us? If the wide receiver comes in and drops a couple passes, Texas is an at-will state. Can the coach say, go in the dressing room, take your uniform off, you're fired? 4 players on the Dartmouth team, men's team, are international students. Their visa says they can't work. How can they be employees, but yet they can't work? So all of these things happen. What really bothers me is if all of this revenue goes from the athletic department to the student athletes, they're going to have to cut programs. Well, where do we train our Olympic athletes? For the most part, we train them on college campuses. And what's going to happen when they cut out those programs? There's just a lot of questions. And of course, the gorilla in the room is Title IX. So I saw the latest numbers for Texas A&M last week. In the 3 years that student athletes could sign NIL contracts, our male student athletes have signed contracts. It doesn't mean they've been paid this much, but they've signed contracts for a little over $25 million. Our female student athletes have signed for $533,000. That's 98% to 2%. So what happens with Title IX? And so that leaves us with where I started. The times, they are a-changing. Thank you.